The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we are looking at children's health challenges from a different perspective, one that includes critical thinking, one that's not afraid to give you the honest truth. My guest today, welcoming back Dr. Michelle Perro. Thanks for coming back and joining us.
Paul, my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
I have to let our audience know, because it's been a while, and I don't think I introduced you properly last time we talked. You have an incredible background, and we're going to tap into that today as we talk about obesity in children and these new GLP-1 agonist drugs and your expertise, the environment. But you have been a clinician for 43 years with a focus in pediatrics and integrative medicine, dedicating your treatment to children and families. Your background, my goodness, Yale graduate, trained at Mount Sinai Medical School. You've been the director of the Pediatric Emergency Department, New York City. Was it the city?
It was New York Medical College. I was at Metropolitan Hospital. I really loved it there. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then you were at UCSF Oakland Children's. That's a huge children's hospital.
Oh, my goodness. I was schooled there as well.
Yep.
I learned a few things.
Yep. And then more recently, which would be the last 25 years recently, you have really championed integrative health approaches. You've focused on GM foods, pesticides, environmental toxicants. You really are an environmental pediatrician, one of the few, and a leading expert. You lecture globally. You've got that amazing book, What's Making Our Children Sick. And I'm excited. You're pivoting, and your new book coming out, hopefully by the end of this year, is What's Making Our Children Well, right?
Well, the book is just being edited now. I'm really excited about it because this is a guidebook for parents. I wanted to download my brain before I join my chickens in the compost field and really share what I've learned over decades of a lifetime of practice. So much like you, Paul. We've picked up so many tips along the way that I just want to share them.
I am so looking forward to that.
Thank you.
You are also the CEO and founder of GMOscience.org. And this is an incredible website and organization promoting food as medicine, regenerative health. And you host a new podcast, The New MDs, which when I first saw that, I thought it was doctors. But what does MDs stand for?
Well, it's an interesting history on that as well. We were mothers, doctors, and scientists, and I was so blessed to have Zen Honeycutt from Moms Across America and the brilliant and Dr. Stephanie Seneff, MIT researcher. But then they pivoted because they are so busy doing other projects. So I am now leaving at the New MDs, and the integrative pediatrician is in. So I'm focusing now on more parent-based topics, still environmental health being my focus, but willing to branch out when the need rises.
That's awesome. Well, let's get started on childhood obesity. Maybe you can just educate our audience a little bit on how much of a problem it is, and then let's get into both the GLP-1 agonists, and then also you've got a host of information on environmental approaches.
Indeed, Paul. So there is nobody in the U.S. is not aware that obesity in children is a problem. It wasn't always that way. And for the practitioners who are old school, like Paul and myself, we in the 1980s, when I started practicing, the early 80s, it was barely an issue. And it was called a condition back then. And we morphed it into a disease entity with its own little ICD-10 code. We have the guesstimate is approximately 20% of American children. I think that's about 14.7 million kids are obese. But what's interesting about that, Paul, is that it's by state. Some states are more obese than others. And like Colorado is a leaner state, with some of the southern states like Mississippi and Alabama having higher rates. There's also an ethnic difference of obesity, with certain populations, people of color, brown and black people, higher incidence, and lowest is in Asian communities and white children. So those are other factors to consider why we're seeing these social discrepancies. But indeed, obesity now, a disease affecting all kids, all ages, started rising during COVID. There is the link to the lifestyle, school, lack of exercise. It went up like 17% during COVID. The COVID era when kids were in lockdown. Not a great idea for children, never was. And so now we're dealing with this disorder, which is not benign because
Yeah.
obesity is associated with cardiovascular disease, autoimmunity, mental health disruptions, food disorders, and even cancer.
Mm.
Not benign. And the self esteem of the children who suffer with this is profound. And for those of us who've been in clinics have seen it, where kids literally hide themselves in clothing. I've seen some obese children who come to clinic in the heat of summer with hoodies and thick sweatshirts. They're so embarrassed by their body.
Yeah. And in addition to the up to almost 20% who meet the criteria for obesity itself, overweight is a bigger category, right? Children who are maybe they don't meet the criteria for obesity, but they're overweight.
And also not just overweight, but their body fat distribution changing with more of that toxic fat around the middle. If you go to any park now, you'll see children who look different, and they're straighter with more truncal obesity. That's more cardiovascular active fat. And so by the BMI criteria, which I've never liked, true, not obese by a BMI criteria, but still overweight. And even small amounts of weight carried are harder for children to manifest. So it's harder for them to move around, to climb, to be active in gym, all that. So yes, we don't count those kids, but those kids are out there and they are also affected.
Yep. So, I did regular mainstream pediatrics for a while, and then a lot of years, almost 2 decades of integrative pediatrics. But regardless, I was seeing this in my practice, and it was one of the toughest things to deal with. I felt, and I'll be interested in your input on this, it feels to me like it's a lifestyle issue, but it's a lifestyle issue that is almost impossible to turn around because of, I think it's the foods that people have access to. What are your thoughts about that?
No doubt. So I also talk lifestyle all the time, what we're eating, movement. We were designed to move, sleep hygiene, all that, Paul. And I've heard you discuss it. Dr. Larry Pavlevsky discussed it. We're all talking about it. However, it is the onslaught of toxic food in our children's environment, from their daycare to their school lunches to their homes to parents doing drive-throughs because they're too tired to cook. And it's the ultra-processed foods and what's in the ultra-processed foods. Secretary Kennedy was correct in the Maha Commission report looking at ultra-processed foods, but we need to do a little bit of a deeper dive there. What's making them up? And this is what I wrote about. It's the GMOs and the pesticides that are causing the ultra-processed food that sits on shelves for 2 years. We're not supposed to eat stuff that you can't break down. So it is that ingredient profile that what our children are consuming that's causing the insulin resistance, and insulin resistance drives down our own natural GLP, glycogen-like peptide 1, which causes satiation and is the offshoot. It gets insulin to be released, so we uptake that sugar. So ultra processed foods are the main culprit, but what they are made of, we have a toxic assault on our children's food that's making them sick and driving the obesity epidemic. It's an epidemic. If it's less than 1 in 100, it's an epidemic by definition. We've been in this for a long time, for probably 45 years, trending up. And so this is what we must look at.
Yeah. So before we get to some of the solutions, which you've presented so well on your website and in your writings, I want to touch on this GLP-1 agonist. For viewers, don't worry about the terms because, I don't even understand what a GLP is. Dr. Michelle's going to explain it to us. But if I'm in practice, let's just say I'm not, by the way, everything here is just informational. I don't diagnose or treat. I'm retired. But when I was in practice, one of the most appealing things would be if there was a drug that would solve this obesity issue, I'd be very tempted to jump on board because it is so hard to get children who are struggling with obesity to turn that around. So then AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, which I was a member of for very long, came out in 2023 with recommendations that included weight loss drugs for obese children as young as 8, and even bariatric surgery for obesity as young as 13. Now we've got these drugs that are almost being touted like magic, these GLP-1 drugs. I'm not sure I'm a fan. What are your thoughts about it? What are the concerns?
Yeah, on paper, those drugs look so good because they are natural hormone. They're mimetics, meaning they're a copy of what we already have physiologically. We make these GLP-1s. They're hormones. They're little peptide hormones, and we make them in our gut. We make them in our pancreas. We make them in our brain. So that should tell you something right there about that gut-brain axis right there. So they are the satiety hormones. So when you eat, they're released, and your body says, "Oh, had enough." But if the food isn't nourishing and is bereft of nutrition, they may not be turning off. They're also broken down in your body super quick. On paper, those drugs look amazing. All kinds of health benefits, cardiovascular benefits, brain health benefits. They're the best thing since sliced bread. But Paul, as you and I know, there's no magic bullet for this. And so what are the problems? There are several. Number one, no long-term data on children who are still growing. The AAP in its wisdom said, oh, kids over 12 can start taking these drugs. Well, wait a minute. Kids over 12 are still growing. Even if girls have their menses and they've stopped physically growing in stature, their bodies are still changing. Boys are still growing till 18, 19. We know the brain is still developing until 25. So now we're giving these drugs. Again, no long-term data. Number two, weight loss returns upon stopping the drug. Initially, they said 60%. It's probably all weight loss returns. Now, when they gain that weight back, they don't gain back the muscle they lost. It appears that you can lose. I've seen 30, 40, I've seen 60% in the data when I was reviewing all the data about muscle mass loss with these drugs. Kids don't have that much muscle mass to begin with. Some kids are very lean. And when they regain their weight, they gain it as fat cells. So that muscle has the most mitochondria, metabolically active tissue. You don't want muscle loss. And we know in the anti-aging movement, what do we tell people? Is gain muscle, weightlifting, get to the gym, right? Resistance, bands.
Yeah.
So those are big problems. Additionally, there are other side effects like gastroparesis, which means the stomach can stop moving and can get paralyzed. Pancreatitis, we learned 43 years ago, don't mess with the pancreas. An inflamed pancreas, a kid will not be a happy camper. It is not a benign disease. It's painful as heck. Hard to treat, pancreatitis, and gallbladder disease. This drug, in its wisdom, got approved for Medicaid, it's Medicare, and Medicaid, Medi-Cal in California, to the tune of $12,000 a year. And no discussion of lifestyle change. And not all the kids got nutritional counseling who got prescribed this drug. And so there were two drugs prescribed for kids, the Wegovy, which is a semaglutide, which is in once-a-week injection, and the lirapeptide Saxenda, which is, I believe, an oral pill. I've never prescribed this drug, Paul. You said, well, how can you be talking on a drug you never prescribed? I don't prescribe a lot of drugs.
Right.
I use nutritional medicine, herbal medicine, homeopathic medicine, manipulative medicine, cognitive behavioral therapy, acupuncture when indicated, etc. There are other ways to treat children. You and I, the holistic space, know this. Hopefully everyone knows this. And so these are just some of my concerns. And the drug needs a black box warning because it's an increased risk of depression and suicide. With drugs, it changes dopamine as well. And it also causes apathy. Do we need our kids to be more apathetic? It's like, and they can tune out. So there's this whole host of side effects from these drugs. And what did the AAP do? AAP, I kind of went hard on the AAP. They approved it. And since they approved it in 2023, as you mentioned, the prescription and prescribing has gone up like 65% by pediatricians. Oh, they're prescribing it.
Yep.
So there you have it.
Wow. For our viewers, if you missed this, I mean, when you describe all those effects and side effects, it sounds like a disaster. We need our muscle, and children need to grow when they're in those growing years. You don't get those years back. So we know that kids who get their growth arrested for whatever reason, they never are able to attain their potential. So that's huge. But you might say, oh, well, who cares about growth? Well, as you pointed out, it's not just physical size growth, it's brain, it's everything. And then the fact that you would take a drug that you now basically have to take for life, which is a pharmaceutical, boom, slam dunk. Get people on something they have to take for life, because when they go off of it, they gain the weight right back. And it's even a worse type of weight gain that you pointed out. I don't think this should be prescribed perhaps to anybody. I don't know. It's just crazy.
Well, initially they were designed for diabetes, and perhaps there's some use in there. But then they became these weight loss drugs. And I was looking around on Amazon yesterday. I said, I wonder if I can find these drugs without a prescription. I found it.
Oh,
I found
interesting.
Tirapeptide. I think it's a Saxenda drug. It was a generic, and I found it on Amazon. So kids, this is what I also thought of. So you have kids on the wrestling team, and they need to make a certain weight category. They can just pop that drug. Will they be selling it to each other? 100%. They sell their ADHD medications back and forth in high school. Go to any high school parking lot, and you'll see.
They sure do. Oh my gosh. That just reminded me. My own kids were very ADD, ADHD. I unfortunately had my kids before I woke up to what was really going on with vaccines, and we didn't feed our kids right either. So yeah, they suffered greatly, but they didn't do well in the meds, but they stayed on them so they could sell them. I only learned this much later.
I mean, kids are so clever, and they're doing things out there we have no idea. Now that they're all on their phones, texting each other constantly, there's a whole world happening that parents are unaware of. So just when you think you know it all, you know nothing. So yes, they have access. They can swap their own drugs, get down that weight for the prom or the wrestling team or whatever it is they're trying to lose weight for. And we've got a disaster when kids start managing these drugs on their own, which is going to happen, which might be happening now. I'm not sure. I suspect it is. I want to go to the high school parking lot and have a look.
I'm sure you're right. I'd like to pivot now into what I consider probably the best solution to this challenge. And it's not the prescription. It's not these GLP-1 drugs. It is what we're eating. And I think you have the best resource. I was reading through it and it's like, wow. So I know for my own health, I am trying hard to avoid pesticides. And you're the environmental pediatrician. You've written extensively on this. I like your article that's available to parents. I think you wrote it for parents in GMO Science. Can you review for us what are the pesticides and how do we avoid them?
There is a way to avoid pesticides in food, and that's eating organic. And now I say organic regenerative when you can, but let's just stick to organic. So I researched in the past every class of pesticides, and it turns out they are all obesogens. And simply what that means is that these are chemicals that can cause hormone disruption, often via this hormone signaling. Hormones work at very low levels in the body, talking to each other all the time. Every single class of pesticides, and there are quite a few that I checked, are all hormone disruptors. And that includes organophosphates. Those are the ones that kill insecticides. Glyphosate, everyone's heard of that, about Roundup. And that is an herbicide, also a hormone disruptor. The carbamates, the drugs, the permethrins, the organochlorines, which we don't even use anymore, DDT, still in the environment. That was a blessing by the industry. Thank you, Rachel Carson, for pointing that out to us. That is still found in people. What they don't share with you is that the average food contains at least 6 pesticides, and there is something called negative synergism. So we know that they don't purposely study the toxic soup when all these pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, biocides kill life are together. The same is true for toxic metals, which I didn't want to get into today. Let's just stick to the pesticides. But they change our chemistry and they could lead to obesity. This is why parents have to be hardcore about what their kids are eating. Cooking at home, buying organic, sending your kids to school lunches, breakfast with real food, not ultra processed food. Even if it's organic, leave it on the shelf, get back in the kitchen. This is what we must do to protect our children's health. Or you will be dealing, parents, and I hate to say, with these disasters, not to mention your own health. If mom and dad aren't healthy, the whole house of cards fall. So this is one thing parents must do, and is remove the obesogenic, and it's not just pesticides, it also includes plasticizers, phthalates. These other chemicals are also obesogens. So that's the first thing we can do, Paul. And every family has the tools to do this.
I don't cook at home. I mean, I do once in a great while, but mostly I'm eating out, and I don't know how to find healthy food when I'm out, like eating in restaurants or fast foods.
There's a reason why, because the restaurants, many of them, especially here, and I'm in Crunchy Town, California, many of them are not healthy. Even the higher end restaurants, they're using the cheapest ingredients. How do you know? Go to Costco in the morning before the regular people are let in, and you see all the businesses there. I used to shop for my kids' schools. They are loaded with the worst GMO canola oil, GMO foods. I was like, what are these restaurants doing? 46% of our incomes as families is spent eating out. So imagine if we could take that 46% of our income and turn it into buying whole foods, buying in bulk, buying in places where they sell organics, whether it's Costco, Trader Joe's, Sprouts. I have no stock in any of these companies, or your farmer's market. Woohoo! Growing your own. Of course, we say that a million times. Chances are you're not growing your own coffee or your own dairy. Just saying. So we need to learn where these places are. Now, what I did with my family later in the beginning, I did not know this, Paul, just like you. Full disclosure, we've also walked the walk. On Sundays, I would prep all the food for the week. I get glass containers. I'd make 3 meals, and then I would feed off those meals and just sub them in. I even cut all the veggies up on Sundays, and I would do it. Mistake number 1, not including the kids in the kitchen. So get everybody in there prepping the food. Takeout is a mistake. And it's all ultra processed, and a lot of it is toxic. It's toxic seed oils. I've heard Dr. McCullough talk so much on toxic seed oils. Avoid. I use butter, olive oil, coconut oil, and occasionally avocado oil is what I use.
Wow. Thank you for that reminder on food prep. I only know of a handful of people in my whole life that I've run across who actually do that methodically and faithfully. And you're absolutely right. That would solve my challenge that I had. Was I was busy during the week and I didn't have time to prepare food. But Sundays I could carve out 3-4 hours or even a couple hours probably to make that all happen. That's an amazing tip. I'm curious, before we wrap up this segment here, in your new upcoming book, do you have any pearls you might be able to share related to this topic?
Yes, I do. In the upcoming book, I have a lot of homeopathic tips on how to deal with some of these issues. I'm trying to think if there's something specific. I went into the nutrition part of it really hard. I talked a lot about fiber in the new book. I go into fiber hard, soluble, insoluble. People's like, oh my God, why? Because why? Apple, inulin, onion. Apple has pectin, onion has inulin. Those foods feed the microbiome. And we know that there are certain microbes like Akkermansia mucinophila that can prevent obesity. So by building the child's microbiome, you take out glyphosate, Roundup, antibiotic, you put in the food that the microbes need to eat, feed your bugs, and then you could have the healthy bugs grow, which also support our own endogenous, the GLP-1s that we make. So that is one thing that parents can do, and that comes in apples. An apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Eat real food.
Eat real food. And send your kids to school with an apple. So my kids didn't like to eat a whole apple. This is a true story, Paul. I was that mom that cut the apple up in a little glass container, sprinkled it with cinnamon, and my kids would eat the cut apple. I have a cut fruit theory, but not the whole apple. Why that is, I couldn't tell you. Every kid I've ever come across, when you cut the fruit, they eat it.
Yeah. Something about something you can just pop in your mouth. It's kind of like fast food, but it's a healthy fast food.
It's a healthy fast food. So apples, dried fruits are okay too. So trying just to understand this gut-brain microbiome connection that we're really feeding the entire organism, including the kids' microbes. And what's really making our kids sick, other than the ultra-processed foods and the GMOs and pesticides, is the assault on our microbes. Without our bugs, Paul, ain't nothing happening.
Yep. That could be another whole episode.
Yeah, that could be. We can talk. I talk a lot about bugs. Yes.
Yep. So to wrap this one up, this topic today is obesity and then the GLP-1 drugs. What's the take-home message for parents and anybody that's contemplating using those drugs?
Yeah. So if you're contemplating using it for your kid, they're 12, they're 15, they're 17, don't. And I'd say it because they will get that success with side effects. 90% of people had side effects on those drugs like diarrhea and stomach aches and stuff. Avoid the drugs. We're not trying to medicalize our children. We're creating a reliance on pharmaceuticals. We want to build healthy eating habits by changing the foods that they're eating, promoting movement. Kids must move, get them off their screens. I think we should do a digital detox in every family and get them moving whatever way they can, whatever way you can. And parents, engage with your kids in the activities. Bike rides together, hikes together, swim together, throw the frisbee together, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter, but get them moving because we know that also movement lowers your blood glucose, right? If you have a big meal and then you go for a walk, it blunts your glucose response. So these are simple things that parents could do at home with their children and be part of the solution. Don't signal one child out. Maybe your other kids are not struggling, only one is. Everyone is treated equally. We don't shame children. Everyone gets involved.
Wonderful. And I would add to that, and you've already sort of alluded to it. Parents, I'm a parent. It starts with us. It doesn't work to say I'm too tired or whatever list of excuses I might come up with that allow me to not do what Dr. Perro just suggested we do. I mean, those are basics, eating real food and movement. It doesn't get more basic than that. And I would have probably said back in the day, I'm too tired.
But I go to the park sometimes, when I'm riding my bike around town, and there are so many kids running around playing, and the parents are sitting on the benches on their phones.
Yep.
And I'd say, please, parents, put the phone down because you are modeling the behavior. So when you're bored, go. I'm not saying you have to go play with your kid, but is there anything else you can do other than being on your phone? Parents, take a digital break. We need to get off our phones because what we're teaching children is to be constantly entertained by the internet or whatever gaming they're doing on their phone. This is not benign, Paul. You and I know it. It causes neurochemical changes, and that's another show right there. So engage with your kids and leave the phone at home. Tell everyone you're going for a walk. You'll be back in a couple of hours. We were once not reachable as humans. We could be gone for a few hours without being tied to a device.
Yeah. Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Perro. I'm
pleasure.
having you back soon for sure. Appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you so much, Paul. Likewise. Love your show.
Thank you. And folks, you can find me at kidsfirstforever.com. My new book, Vax Facts, covers everything related to vaccines that you might have questions about. And thank you for viewing. I look forward to seeing you next week.
My name is Holly.
And what qualifications do you have?
I am a 35-year clinical microbiologist, licensed, and as well as I've done numerous years of research in Salk. So I've basically been in charge of molecular diagnostics for a major health system in San Diego for 35 years.
Okay, and so what can you tell us, what did you do during the pandemic? Let's put it that way.
Well, I was notified right away that I was going to have to validate a PCR test for testing for COVID-19. I have done such things before many times, and the CDC sent me a test to validate to be run at our hospital. When I was validating it, I found that it only had what we call 2 primers. Primers are basically little pieces of DNA to identify an organism or a virus. Well, that simply is not enough. I complained to the CDC. I said, this can't be done. They admitted to me that one of the primers, one of the ways I was going to identify this, was actually common to every coronavirus out there. I said, so I'm using one primer to try to identify something. That's like playing a game, name that tune, and I give you 1 note. How can you identify a song by that? They said it does not matter because this is under emergency use only and to run the test anyway. I was shocked because this meant this test was going to throw out many false positives. I said, how do we verify that our positives are real true positives? Do I report them as possible? Do I report them as possible COVID-19 retest? They said, no, report them as strictly positive. I said, this violates every PCR protocol we've ever had in the last 25 years. And they said, it doesn't matter, it's under emergency use only. The other thing I asked, I said, I only have a biosafety lab level 2 as well as a biosafety lab level 3. I said, this virus should be under BSL 4, which is a respiratory virus. They said, it doesn't matter. Work with it on the counter. We don't care. I said, what? How? You're saying that I'm supposed to be treating tuberculosis with more care than this virus? Yeah, doesn't matter. And click, run it. Well, I got very upset when I brought the test up, and we started running hundreds and thousands of them a week. We were having sometimes up to 30% were positive, and the crossing times on these, which means we had to run them for long times before we could even detect this virus, quote unquote. And so people were being thrown into the hospital with something that was very likely not true. The other thing that went very wrong is when I would report a negative test, they would send me 5 more samples to run. And I said, well, I've already done it. And they said, doesn't matter, keep running them. I had got to up to 10 specimens per patient per day to run. And what I couldn't understand, because in normal cases, you don't run things multiple times over and over, I realized later that they were fishing for positives. So the other thing, what they were doing is they were putting people on the ventilators, and then they were opening them up and they're doing pleural peels, opening their lungs up and scraping them out and sending it to me to do a PCR test. I said, I have never validated this test on doing it. They said, run it anyway. Most of them were negative, and then I was complaining because they were sending me Jello. And I said, is this a washing of the lung? They said, no, this is the lung itself. Well, lung is like a piece of meat. It's like a steak. And so I couldn't understand what they were doing because the lungs they were sending me was liquefied. And they said they were literally taking lung out of it. So I started putting things together like something was going very wrong. I went to management and I said, what I'm doing is wrong, it's inappropriate, and there's no way to verify what I'm doing. This needs to stop. They all brought me into a room and they said, you need to do your job. And I said, my job isn't to report out erroneous results. This needs to stop. So they brought in a physician, they certified me mentally ill and marched me off the property.
Well, how did they certify you? What did you do to be certified?
They said working with COVID has caused me too stressed and I could not do my job. And as a physician signed off that I had post-traumatic stress and I could not work in the laboratory and do my job. Even though 10 days earlier, they gave me a 10% raise and said I was invaluable to their system. So in 10 days, I had a mental breakdown.
So they put you on leave?
Yes. A mental leave of absence.
What was the gooey stuff? Did you ever find out what the gooey stuff was?
No.
So just talk about that a second. You said they put them on ventilators.
Yes.
The patients.
Yes.
And then they died and they opened the lungs? Or they're still
No,
alive?
these people were alive when they did this. Yes. They called them, we're pleural peels. I would sometimes get 2 or 3 a day of people on ventilators.
And they wanted you to test to see if it was
Positive for PCR for COVID-19, yes. And that was one of my breaking points because they wanted a positive test. The test I developed was hypersensitive to be positive, but they wanted any test to be positive. I realized later they had a motivation for this that I didn't realize at the time that they had. They needed that positive test.
Needed positive.
Yes.
Let's talk about the test itself for a second. Is there anything good about the PCR test? Does it work in any way, shape or form? Or is it you say it's sort of coronavirus, remember that word?
Yes.
So that's common cold, right?
It's a common cold.
So
If I were to swab this area, we could come up with a positive PCR because it is everywhere. And this is why there were a couple of patients I was pretty sure had something, because the crossing times were like 11 and 12. That means the logarithmic curve of it came very up quickly. The ones that were coming up at 38, 48, 40, 42 cycles were probably just garbage that was out in the environment. But they were telling me. Now, if I had run this, like if you had tuberculosis, your doctor thinks you had tuberculosis, I could run a PCR on your lung. I look for 5 primers to see if I can find tuberculosis. They all have to hit for me. And the only thing I could say is possible tuberculosis to be confirmed by culturing to see if I can grow it. It's only like all PCR is a screening test. I ran PCR on people with hepatitis. Possible hepatitis. Please do antibody, please do other screenings. I send it to other labs for them to validate. None of this was done for COVID. They just wanted a positive result on something that was going to give them a positive result if they ran it enough.
Which is kind of the beginning of everything wrong with the PCR test, because many people test positive.
Absolutely.
Had a panic attack, ended up on
Absolutely.
ventilator.
In fact, I noticed when the people who came in, because they were allowing everyone, the one thing about PCR is we will not run it unless you have other symptoms. Like I've had doctors call me, I'm sure my patient has hepatitis. And I said, does he have an antibody to hepatitis? Is his liver enzymes in? We refuse to do it until they do all the preliminary testing. Then we give it to them, and then we send it to another lab to confirm. So this was basically, they wanted that test, and they wanted it to be positive because they got a significant amount of money if it was.
That's what a lot of this is about.
Yes, yes. And that's what I found out, that in reality, this was, I actually, when I looked back, I saw the reasons why this happened. In 2017, I was told to make my resume out because our hospital system was going to be bankrupt within 4 years. Turns out the Medicare system was going to change the reimbursement to where the hospitals will not get enough money to basically survive. I had a close friend who worked in the CEO of the financial that, interesting, I tried for years to get new refrigerators. Everything was falling apart in a lab that I was keeping running with tongue depressors. The minute COVID hit, when I got 3 refrigerators, showed up. You need them. Here's the money. Do it. And I worked for 25 years to get those refrigerators. So I knew immediately that COVID-19 was going to save the hospital in terms of financially, yes. And they did it by killing people, unfortunately, in my opinion.
No, we've had them sitting here, loved ones told us
Yes.
about the...
And I watched it because I was in the laboratory. I watched people who came in who all of a sudden got a positive PCR test. When they ran their cortisol levels, they went through the roof. These people, and when your cortisol goes up, your immune system plummets. People were literally being scared to death. And they pressured people to get on ventilators too, because that upped the money count. So I didn't realize at the time that I was in the middle of a cog of something that was out of control. Now that I'm looking back, I understand everything a lot better than at the time. But I made a big stand with the whole laboratory. There were 300 people in that lab, and I'm the only one that I refused to put a mask on, and I refused to get that vaccine, and I refused to run that test.
Which made you mentally ill.
Yes, absolutely.
So
I'm certified.
Going back to PCR test again, because when the whole thing was crazy and everyone was posting stuff, there was a lot of talk about PCR tests being contaminated with potential graphene oxide. I can't even remember what it was.
The one thing I will say about at least what I watched, I do not believe that's true, because a lot of us, I didn't even have any gloves. There was nothing. There was no PPE. I was running COVID testing with my bare hands, with no masks, with no lab coats, because we didn't have any. It was all gone. So, and we were making up kits with practically Q-tips, because no company could produce them fast enough. So we were putting little saline in little things with vials with Q-tips by it to give to people to run that test. PCR does not work unless you have epithelial cells, because the virus is inside the cells. So if you just sort of spit in something, if it doesn't have enough epithelial, I can't run the PCR. So they have these swabs, and they're nasty, I will say. We have used them for years. People hate them because and the fact is you don't need, people were telling me they were bloodying people by putting these swabs that were practically doing brain biopsies, which was inappropriate. You could just do like a little tiny bit on each one of the nares, and that's all you need to do. So I don't know what this brain biopsy thing that they were doing, which is ridiculous. We did flu, and we never did it that way. So to me, I think they wanted almost a drama with this. Unless you can really show me how they did the graphene, I don't know. I'm just I will say that in my experience, none of that was happening. It was literally, but they were doing too much of the deep nasopharyngeal damage to a lot of people, which I agree.
So the tests that by the way, have never had one of these tests in my life. I don't even know what they even look like. So this is why I'm not great at this. But I do know a lot of my friends were like, "Oh, I just did a test. I'm positive. I did a test. I presume they go and buy them. I don't know how it works." Were they all the same, giving false positives as well? Because an awful comment. It seems you're right. That basically, if someone had a sneeze, they would get tested.
Oh, you could. I literally, in fact, we did something. When you're in a PCR department, you have to do something every quarter called a wipe test, which means I have to take a swab, run around the lab, and start swabbing it, and then run it for various PCR. If it's positive, your lab is contaminated. I did swab. Guess where you find it? On the refrigerator on the door where people grab. So guess what they're doing? Their gloves or cans are contaminated with it. They put it on the door, and then I swab it for a wipe test, and I find it. I swear I could swab this bus and I could find it. But see, what does that mean? It means it's garbage. And the thing is people say, well, it means I have COVID. And I go, well, let's take my finger off. Let's take this finger and throw it in the parking lot. And we discover this. What does this mean? It means my finger is in the parking lot. Does it mean I'm dead? Does it mean I'm alive? All you know is this finger is in the parking lot, and we have identified it to me. It doesn't, so I can pick up dead viruses that have no life, that are little parts, and then people say they have COVID. You don't know whether it's, and that's the problem which I had with the test, is that normally when I detect a virus, I can send it to another lab and they can grow it. It's living, it's growing in tissue. They know it's viable. This test, you could not prove if what I'm detecting is dead or alive. Just like if you find my thumb in the parking lot, you cannot tell if I'm dead or alive.
So the whole thing's a farce.
It's a farce, yes. That's what got me fired. I said, the truth will set me free, and it set me free because they threw me out.
Do you have a job now?
No. I've been blackballed. I went from making $70 an hour to working part-time in a little health food store. Yeah. So I'm unemployable at this point, and they've tried to employ me. Several hospitals have offered me $1,600 a day to work for them. The first question I say, do I have to mask, and do I have to get that vax? Yes and yes, bye. I will under no circumstance. You cannot buy me off with this. So, but they're desperate for someone with my experience. But unfortunately, I will call that test out because the test is invalid. You cannot validate it. And the other thing is, if you're throwing out these false positives, you need a methodology to see if that virus is actually alive and causing someone problems. That is standard procedure. And I kept saying we need to send these out to another lab that can grow them. They said, no, this is an emergency. We have no time for that.
Do these people that were saying, no, it's an emergency, and said you had mental illness, were they so brainwashed that they truly believed all this, or were they in on the darkness?
I think the upper management was in on the darkness. And the reason why I'm saying that is I really liked our original CEO. He was a great man. And 6 months before COVID hit, he said he decided to retire at 60 to be with his family. And he had been there for like 20 years. And that shocked me because he was very well respected. The people they brought in afterwards were different. So I honestly, this is my theory, I'm not saying this is true, is I think they, like chess, they planted their pieces before they went in for the real kill. And I think the hospital administrators understood this. I can only speak to mine, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out that they were all in collusion with this.
Because some of these reports we're getting of nurses and doctors, I mean, it's just evil.
It is evil.
Or they're possessed.
I understand that they're making a lot of money. Even my doctor, my personal doctor, years ago told me that he made $80,000 bonus every year if he got 80% of his practice vaccinated. He meant it. He said, the reason you don't make me any money because I don't do any of it. So he would say, can we make a deal if you do a certain thing? I said, I don't inject myself with anything. So I would do occult bloods and some other testing. But he said, I can't make any money off of you. So these doctors were compromised in terms of they had to make a decision. Am I going to make a shitload of money or am I going to be on the side of truth? And the grand majority of them chose the latter.
Money.
It is big. I know. And for me, I cannot lie like this.
Not when you're killing people.
Not when I watched how many people. The other thing which I will say, which has never come out, 3 of our pathologists got COVID very early on. They were given hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. We were told, all of us, not to tell anyone about it. They were back in work and within a week.
Who gave them the ivermectin? The doctors? The pathologists?
Yes. So to me, they said it's because it's a experimental thing. We don't want anyone to think it could work. Well, obviously they knew it did. The other thing is I have a very close friend who was involved in Fort Detrick and did sequencing, friends with Judy Mikovich. And he did say that he found plasmodium, which is malaria sequences in that virus. Well, it's almost like they engineered it with a kill switch in case the wrong person got it, so you have a way of treating. So I would be very shocked if they did not know how to treat this virus with ivermectin and other things, because I think it was engineered to do this. So, I mean, I know I've gone to the crazy dark side, but with everything that I've seen, if you were to talk to me, 2 or 3 years ago, I was being so gaslit, I didn't know what the heck was going on. And when they walked me off the property, I didn't know whether I was doing the right thing or not. I had so many people, tell me that, they needed to have all this stuff done and all this COVID analysis needs to be, and I was looking at it, it was all a lie. And no one could hear me. So I spent a whole year trying to get people to stop from not take that shot. I did everything I could. I have had people, literally will never talk to me ever again. I had people call me up screaming because you're going to convince my brother not to take a shot and he's going to die and his death is on you. I had a lot of crazy stuff happen to me. But when this happens, you really kind of think, am I doing the right thing? Because everyone is so hell-bent to jump off a cliff and I'm trying to stop them. So now I look back, I feel more vindicated, but I couldn't stop the lab from doing what it did. Who knows how many hundreds of thousands of people were affected by what was coming out of that lab. I don't know. I did my best. I just pray that there is some justice that will come out of all this, and that those who were partaking in this, to me it's beyond fraud. It's in a different realm of spiritual evil, and that those people who were involved with this need to have something. They need to either have their medical license stripped or something for participating in something that was obviously not right. And I hope to see before I die that there is some justice done for all of this. And I just want to say sorry to the world that I couldn't help as many as I tried to do.